Good day. You're welcome to the Scrum Foundation Professional Certification course. This program promises to be an insightful and an interesting one. Let's begin this journey together into the world of Scrum. Let's start this journey and go into all that Agile and Scrum is about. This program is coming to you courtesy of OAK Interlink Company, one of the foremost training companies here in the continent of Africa. We run an array of professional certification programs, and we are a training firm as well as a consulting firm. We also outsource for quite a number of organizations all around the country. My name is Ernest Obieshaka. I'm the head of training here at OAK Interlink Company. I'm a certified Scrum Master. I'm a certified trainer as well. And you are in safe hands. Now, what's the course objective? What's the objective of this program? Of course, to help participants to gain basic knowledge of Agile Scrum. To also help you acquire the skills to adequately plan for Scrum implementation. So also enable you acquire the skills to develop products in the workplace. And of course, most importantly, to help you gain a certification in Agile Scrum Foundation stage. Now, Scrum, interestingly, came from an interesting game called rugby. Many of us might have seen this game on super sports channels. Some of us know the popular game known as the American football. But that particular game has a lot of these players wearing a number of gadgets, helmets and all of that. But the rugby, you don't have the players wearing all of these gadgets, the helmets and all of the shoulder pads, and no, they don't have that. So Scrum that concept originated from this game, where the team actually uses this to achieve its result. That's where the word Scrum originated from. But what brought about the introduction of Agile Scrum? Let's start with the understanding of Agile before we go to the understanding of what Scrum is. Now, initially, before, projects were being managed, approaching it using what is called the predictive approach, what popularly many of us know as the Waterfall Approach, which starts with your initiating your project, then planning it, then executing it, then monitoring and controlling it, and then closing. So like a waterfall, it goes down that way. It doesn't return back. So this approach, organizations began to see that there were projects that this approach was not effective in. They were not able to manage projects that experienced constant changes, where they needed to go back again and again to change the scope of the work. The predictive approach, the waterfall approach, they give provision for this. Changes happen mainly from the project team members. So it runs through a change control process where we have like a change control system. But a lot of times such projects, they didn't have the stakeholders coming in the course of the project to have to recommend certain things being changed. So the predictive approach didn't accommodate that. And that became a problem. So the Project Management Institute began to explore this other approach to help them to be able to manage projects where the stakeholders had the opportunity to be able to give their feedback while the project was ongoing. And the PMI, the Project Management Institute, partnered with a body called Agile Alliance, and they merged this approach called Agile to managing projects. So now the Project Management Institute has this approach also merged with the predictive approach. So you have either, depending on the project environment you are in, either you have the predictive approach when you can follow a set of processes and changes don't happen often on your project. That means I'm talking of from the stakeholders. Then they also included the Agile approach. So they had what is called a hybrid, as well as the option of these two. Now, I'm going to explain the Agile. The predictive approach is for a totally different course. For those of you who are looking at the PMP certification course by PMI, the predictive approach is what is being used. The waterfall approach is what is popularly called. But our focus for this course is on Agile Scrum. So we're going to start from Agile, then move into Scrum and understand what it really is. Okay. Now, Agile originated from the software industry. The concept of Agile, or what we call Agile adoption, originated from the software industry. But in order to understand what Agile is, we need to be able to understand some terminology, some very important terminologies. Let's start with the terminology called a process. Because many of us tend to think Scrum is a process. Scrum is not a process. Scrum is a process framework. So what is a process then? Simply, a well-defined or a well-defined set of steps and decision points for executing specific tasks to convert certain inputs into outputs, as you see on the screen. So a process is what we tend to see play out in the predictive approach. And there are 49 of these processes that are grouped into 5 groups. An example of a process in the PMI's Project Management Body of Knowledge guide is developing of a project charter. Now, that process is what you get to see when you are going through the Project Management Professional Certification Program by PMI that is focused on the predictive, which is the old, of course, the old curriculum, the old program. But now it has changed. They've now merged Agile with it. So that's an example of a process. Such a process like developing a project charter or developing a project management plan. That's another process. But let's understand, is Agile a process? Now, let's look at it carefully. The project management body of knowledge is recognized as a methodology. Well, when we say methodology, what is a methodology? It's a structured set of methods, practices, processes, and procedures used to attain certain results. That's a methodology. So, an example is the PMI Project Management Body of Knowledge Guide. Also, PRINCE2, which is an acronym for Projects in Controlled or Confined Environments. So, when we look at these methodologies, we ask ourselves, is Agile a methodology? Let's look at it a little closely. Now, Agile is a principle, is a mindset, is hinged on principles and values. So when we say Agile, Agile is a mindset in which you hinge it on certain principles and values in which you deploy within a framework. An example of such a framework is Scrum. Now, can we see the relationship between Agile and Scrum and the project management body of knowledge, popularly known as PMBOK guide? That is a methodology, but Agile is reckoned as a mindset hinged on principles, values, in which you deploy within a framework. Example of such a framework, a popularly known one as Scrum, which is what this course is about. So what is a framework? It's a guideline describing roles and rules upon principles that help and facilitate people in a low prescriptive way. That's a framework. So let's look at this carefully and look at how this actually plays out. So Agile is a principle. Agile is hinged on principles and values, which we're going to look at. Now, it is deployed in a framework. One of such frameworks is Scrum. Now, in order to deploy this Agile within such frameworks, sometimes this approach might require a predictive approach. So it means when you are managing a project, you are either approaching it via Agile or you are approaching it via the predictive approach, which is where a methodology like the project management body of knowledge comes in, or the Prince 2. Now, this methodology, of course, is a collection of processes. I'm talking of the project management body of knowledge. It's a set of processes. There are 49 of them. Example of such processes, of course, we saw earlier as I described, developing of a project charter. And they are all in knowledge areas you need to have knowledge of, like time management or schedule management, cost management, and so on and so forth. So this is how it's structured. And why Agile? What brought about Agile? Because companies started having issues. A lot of companies started to collapse. And what led to the collapse of so many companies? Because of the fact that they failed to respond to the changes within the environment. That's what gives rise to Agile. Agile is an approach that helps you to be able to manage projects in an environment where constant changes are happening very frequently. Agile talks about being flexible. So there are companies that are not flexible, that did not adapt, that were not responding when change, that didn't respond appropriately when change happened. When customers need changes, they were not responding. Example of such companies: Kodak, IBM, BlackBerry, Nokia. So many of them. Why were some of these companies having problems? Why did some of these companies collapse? Why did they lose out? Because of their inability to be flexible, to respond to changes, even when these changes were happening. And when even the customer's needs began to change, their inability to respond appropriately led to them collapsing. And that's why Agile is very important. Agile helps you to manage this change in a very, very lovely way. So, the traditional project management approach, which we know as the waterfall, and it's called the predictive, is normally introduced, or that approach is normally deployed when you go to meet the stakeholder to collect the requirements from the stakeholder in order to be able to carry out the creation of that request, producing what the customer wants, which is a product. So the development or the creation of that is a project. Of course, such projects need to be managed, and such projects need to be managed professionally. That is where the word project management professional came into play. So the traditional approach to managing projects works when these stakeholders that you go to meet to collect requirements from are clear as relating to what they want. They understand clearly what they want, and they state it specifically, particularly when you meet them to collect requirements from them, what they require on this for you to do. So it's like a waiter waiting on you to collect your order while you sit in the restaurant. Now, Even if you are telling the waiter that I want food, the waiter will be asking, okay, what type of food? I want rice. What type of rice? I want fried rice and chicken. What type of chicken? Is it smoked chicken? Is it pepper chicken? Is it fried chicken? Oh, I want fried chicken. And a drink. What type of drink? So there must be clarity as relating to what the customer wants, what the stakeholder wants. So once the customer is clear and is stating it in clear terms what he or she wants, yes, you can use the predictive approach. You can use the project management body of knowledge guide, aligning and following a set of processes to arrive at a predictable outcome. Yes, that can work. You understand? An example is if a customer says, a stakeholder says, I want a 2020 white saloon wagon car as a means of transport that will carry my family of 4 from Lagos to Ibadan. Clear. Such requirement is clear. Now, you don't need to go back from time to time and start asking the customer, okay, so you said, he has stated it that this is what I want. Some stakeholders might even be upset and say, oh, were you deaf when I said it to you? Did you understand what I said? It was clear what I said. Go and do that. So a lot of times when you get to work, you have no need to really consult back to the stakeholder, because he has stated what he or she wants. He's clear on it. And you run through your project to the finish and end, and you deliver that. Now, but this traditional approach to managing project has its disadvantage, which is why Agile came in. What are some of the disadvantages of this? Number one, of course, the stakeholder does not see what is going on until the very end. It means if you look at this slide before you, you will see that the customer is like, expectant, agitating, waiting until the very end. And if it's going to take 6 years, it means he's waiting for 6 years till he gets to see the end of the project, which is the product that the project is delivering. So it means he doesn't get value until the end of 6 years. So he's agitated, he's waiting, he's anxious. You understand? Meaning he doesn't get value or see what he has paid for until the very end. Unlike Agile delivers it in bits to the customer, so the customer gets to see it early. And I'm going to explain what that means. So the traditional approach also has a disadvantage, whereby in a case whereby the customer or the stakeholder now wants to change something in the course while the project is going on. Remember, he doesn't see the project until the very end. So when he gets to see it at the very end after 6 years, and he says, do you know that while this project was ongoing, a new technology came up. There was something new that, that was introduced. And it meant that this thing that you guys have produced will no longer fit the reason why I want this product because of this new technology. So it means you will need to introduce this new technology into what you've created. And then the customers, the project team says, wow, that means we have to start all over. It means when you look at it, that means we just wasted our time. All the effort, energy, resource that we put in, you are telling us that what we've produced doesn't meet your expectation, it's not what you need any longer. It's because of the change in technology or because the users that want to use this product that our project has produced, their needs have changed. Come on. So it begins to bring misunderstanding between the performing organization and the client or the company that needs this product that the project has produced. That becomes an issue. So, but Agile helps address this. Now, but why is Agile being used as an approach? Agile is being used as an approach particularly when the requirements of the stakeholders are not clear. When Agile is being used, when this project is bringing about a product that has never been produced before. It's bringing about a particular type of service or a particular type of product that has never existed. It means you have no historical data to refer to. You have no reference. You have no lessons learned from a previous project that could guide you so that you can project and be able to predict what this will look like. Nothing of such. It means it's new. An example is like when America was sending a man to the moon. They had never ventured into it before. They've never done it before. They didn't know what to expect. That is not predictive. Unlike the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, the traditional waterfall predictive approach, it could predict, because what it does, before you begin a predictive approach, waterfall approach, where you follow a set of processes, the first thing you need to start with is to look into the company's historical data. Find out the lessons learned from previous projects that could inform you and guide you as regards what to expect on this project you're about to enter into. So you can make some estimations, some forecasts, some projections based on some similar projects that have been handled before. So you can predict what you likely will encounter in this project you're about to go into. But in Agile projects, Agile is used in projects whereby there's no historical data. There's nothing to refer back to. And Agile gives you the opportunity to gather historical data while you are ongoing on the project. Gather and develop a lessons learned while you are on the project. The first one. Why? No one has ever done it before. It's new. And that's why you notice that this was deployed or brought about from the software industry. Why? Because a lot of applications, particularly as it relates to technology, projects that are related to technology in particular, where changes in technology happen so frequently. So you're introducing a new technology, something that's never been done before, something new, you understand? And then people need to also get to familiarize themselves with it. So you can't project, you could be blindsided at a point, you could be, taking unawares, it's volatile, there's a lot of risk involved. So in order to manage that risk is why they introduced the Agile approach. Now, in order to manage that risk, the way you manage it are two major ways. We call it the iterative approach and the incremental approach, which I'm going to explain as we go on. So, but if you look at this kind of customer in this kind of project environment, the customer is unclear as relating to what he or she wants. The customer has an idea. The customer, says, well, I have an idea of what I want. But you are to help him or her in the course of this project bring clarity into, what he or she wants. Help by showing him what is called prototype samples. By creating samples of, that means you don't, like in the predictive, go about the whole project, for example, if it's a 6-year project, go about the whole thing at a goal. No. This one, you just do, even if it's within a week or two, depending on the kind of project, a sample of what you think the customer, is thinking about, the idea he has, to show him if it is exactly what he's thinking about or what he thinks he actually wants. So you show him like a prototype, a sample. Now that sample creation, that prototype creation, is not something you have invested so much time, energy, effort. It's a prototype. It's not the main full, project as it were. It's just a sample. You just to have him, then you bring him at an interjection. That is what iteration is. At an interjection to see, what you have produced, to give him an idea if this is close to what he has in his heart or in his mind. Do you understand? So in this example, for example, that we're looking at on the screen, it says, I want a means of transport to move from one place to another. That's not clear. A means of transport? That's not clear. Now, so if you look at the slide, you'll see there's a possibility that a means of transport could involve producing a skateboard. And it says, that is not what I want. You understand? So you withdraw, go back again. You produce like a tricycle, a bicycle. This is close to it, but this will require a lot of energy for me to, you understand, move from one point to the next. This kind of, so, the going back, it means the scope of your project will be changing from time to time. Now, in order to be able to accommodate this, it means it is sampling, prototyping that you need to be delivering to give him an idea, then make a correction, adjust, make a correction, adjust. So it means you have not expended so much producing a sample. You understand? It's not the main thing, the main product, as it were, in terms of the big one. It's just a sample, an idea, giving him an idea or prototype of some sort. So you can get to have his feedback to know whether what you are producing is valuable for him. Do you understand? Why? That is why, Agile projects, or the Agile approach is very lovely. So he tells, I don't want a bicycle. That is, somehow, not, the bicycle, but, it will require me to exert so much energy and all of that. Okay, so they go back and they produce a motorbike. Oh, yeah, you can see the smile. This is more like it. A motorbike, yes, this is nice. But I'm not exerting so much energy and all of that, but this can only take only me. Maybe I'm one person at the back, but it can't take my family of 4. Oh, you're like, family of 4. So you have a family of 4. It's a family of 4 you want to move, you want to convey. You didn't mention that at the initial stage. Okay, let's go back and you understand. So they produce a saloon car, a white saloon car, as you see on the screen, a white saloon. So the customer is excited, is happy, is looking and saying, wow, this is what I want. This is what I want. Yeah, lovely. This can convey my family. This can take all of us, you understand? And he's excited. But look at the journey in having to get to arrive at this value that the customer wants. The time, the effort, energy, you understand, that has been put in has not been so enormous like the main thing. So it means at intervals where you bring in the customer or the stakeholders to look at what you've produced, you understand? We call that iteration. That's an iterative approach because you invite them to get their feedback. So this approach helps you to learn while you're ongoing. So you document lessons that you are learning from this because it's new. You've never done it before. You've never ventured into it before. So it's strange. So it's a way that gives you an opportunity to learn. And if you look at it, Agile talks about, agility, be flexible. Like you see on the screen. This man or this lady being flexible. You understand? So Agile, or what we know as agility, because that's the word. That's where the word Agile came from. Agility. Agility is the ability to both create and respond to change in order to profit in a turbulent business environment. And of course, what gave rise, or why the buzz around Agile Scrum? Why, is Agile Scrum in high demand now? Of course, simply because, the coronavirus situation, the pandemic, led to, a turbulent environment that, caused a lot of businesses to begin to change the way they do business. Example, some companies began to even move, imagine companies that produce car engines, began to move to producing ventilators or machines that, can help people breathe better. That was a response to change. You understand? Now, when we look at the Agile environment, where projects, where you manage projects using Agile, it helps you to be able to see how you can better manage your risk, particularly in a volatile environment where changes happen often. So Agile or agility is the ability to balance flexibility and stability. To balance flexibility and stability. Very important. So what is Agile then? Agile is actually a time-boxed, or what we call iterative approach. Iterative, you understand, to software delivery that builds software. You understand? So what we mean by iterative, it means you produce something. You invite the stakeholders. Look at it. Is this what you are looking at? Is this what you want? You understand? Okay, why not adjust this? Make this wider. Make this higher. Make this, change the color. Make it taller. Make it thicker. So they have input. You make those adjustments. Yeah, this is what I want. So you deliver incrementally. That word incrementally is that a feature of what the entire product is about. Is you deliver a part of it. You understand? So when we hear the word incremental, so Agile is both iterative and incremental. And when we say, Agile is a time-box iterative approach to software delivery that builds software incrementally from the start of the project instead of trying to build it all at once near the very end. So it means instead of like the predictive approach, which is just starting the project and running through till, if, for example, it's a 6-year project, till the 6th year, by the 6th year, they now bring the stakeholder and say, oh, look at it. And of course, that can work if it is introduced in an environment where the stakeholder is clear as relating to what he wants. He has stated it, and he's not going to be changing anything. You understand? It means the scope remains the same. So a lot of times in the predictive approach, the scope is normally fixed. Unlike in the agile approach, it is for projects that the scope changes. Why? Because the stakeholder is not clear as relating to what he wants. So he keeps coming to say, why not change this? Change this. Why not introduce this? Why not change this? And the changes could be as a result of maybe new technology. You understand? Demand in the market. It could be as a result of a change in the user needs. You understand? Maybe the user his need has changed. So the stakeholder who wants to serve that user comes to you and say, oh, the needs of these users have changed. We need to change it this way. We need to include this change. Maybe as a result of, it could even be market trends, it could be a government policy, it could be a number of things that could change, you understand, the need for that product in the market. So, or the need for that service, as it were. So it gives them the opportunity to come into your project and say, oh, make this adjustment here, make this. So that helps you to be able to give value at the end. So that at the end of the day, you are not just running through the motion of, oh, let me complete a project and deliver. The question is what you are delivering. Is it value? Is it what the customer or the stakeholders need? Is it what they love? Is it what aligns with what they need it for? Good question. That's why Agile will be a very lovely approach to use in this case. So, going on, Agile is actually an iterative approach to project management and software development that helps our teams deliver value to their customers a lot faster. Of course, when we mean faster, it means that if you are having to deliver or manage a project in using Agile, it means you are able to deliver your projects, you understand, and the parts of that project, the products that project is bringing about, you're able to deliver it, you understand, early. And when I mean deliver it early, for example, if it's a building, for example, this is Agile. Listen to me, this is Agile. If it's a 7-story building, now Agile follows this approach. It says, okay, instead of look at the predictive approach. The predictive approach is saying we are building, you understand, and we are actually building and carrying out this construction of these 7 floors of this building simultaneously. So it means if it's going to take 3 years, or if it's going to take 6 years to complete this 7-story building, you understand, it means the client will have to wait until the 7 years is over before he or she can get value. It means he can get the building, can get the product. Unlike the Agile approach, which is lovely, it's saying that, listen, we start with the first floor, the ground floor, that is. We build the ground floor, complete it. When I mean complete it, to finishing, to plumbing work, to electrical work, so it means we are not building the 7 floors simultaneously, and then we finish the ground floor, complete it, and then hand it over to the client. And the funny thing, it can immediately go into use. They can start using that ground floor immediately. While the ground floor is in use, they are building the first floor. Then while they are building the first floor, You understand? They complete that, they deliver. That's what we call incremental. While they finish the first floor, they complete that, they move into the second floor, third floor. So it means they build and complete first floor, second floor, third floor, fourth floor, fifth, until the seventh floor, incremental. It means as they finish a floor, they can hand over to the stakeholder and it can put in use immediately while the work is ongoing for the first floor and the second floor and the third floor and like that. You know, that's what we mean by incremental. So an agile team actually delivers this work in small but consumable increments, and the requirements, plans, and results are actually evaluated continuously. So teams have a natural mechanism for responding to change quickly. It means the requirement here, remember, the customer or the stakeholder is not clear as regards it, so it is, you know, being built, you understand, gradually, and this requirement, you know, is fine-tuned, so it's adjusted, and that's where the word progressive elaboration, that's where it comes in here. Progressive elaboration is something that's used greatly in Agile. You understand? Progressive elaboration, very lovely. It means you keep, you know, elaborating. It means you keep fine-tuning, you keep, you know, adjusting, you keep re-estimating, you understand? As you make those changes, you fine-tune it again and say, oh, stakeholder, is this what you want? Okay, yeah, why not adjust this? You go back, adjust, fine-tune, you understand? This way, so you keep elaborating, you understand, as you go on. Very lovely approach, very lovely approach. So what kind of projects do you use Agile for? What kind of projects? Of course, these iterative and incremental and agile approaches will work well for projects that involve new or novel tools, meaning things that are new tools that have not been used before, new techniques, new materials that people have never used before. You don't know how to play out. You don't know how, you understand, it will, you know, it will work, or any form of new domain. Once it's something that is new, it's never been done before, it's a new material, it's a new technique, it's a new approach, it's something that has no reference because it has never been done before, it's better to use Agile. You understand? That's where you use Agile. You understand? And this can also work well for projects that require research and development. It means to explore, find out more about it because you've never experienced it before, you've never seen it before. So high rates, of course, of change happen, you understand, in certain project environments. That's why you use Agile, because of high rates of change. Particularly, of course, when the requirements of the stakeholders are also unclear. And of course, once there's high risk, of course, involved, you use Agile. So you have a final goal that is hard to describe. When you have such a situation, use Agile. When you cannot describe, oh, this is what the end goal will be like, I can't really say, I can't put my hand on it, use Agile. You understand? That's important. So Agile is actually deployed within a framework. Agile cannot be deployed just like that. You don't deploy Agile. You deploy Agile within a framework. You deploy Agile within a framework. Example of such frameworks is Scrum. There are a number of frameworks in which you deploy Agile. And one of the most known and the most popular one is called Scrum. And Scrum is the framework that we are going to be looking at in the course of this program. There are other frameworks. There's Lean, there's Kanban, there's Extreme Programming, popularly known as XP. There's CRISPR, there's Dynamic Systems Development Method, popularly known as DSDM. There's also Feature-Driven Development, popularly known as FDD. So these are all other frameworks in which you deploy Agile. But remember, our focus is the first one, which is the framework called Scrum. So Agile, where did it originate from? How did Agile come into being? Where did Agile come from? In the year 2001, February 11th to 13th, 17 software development critics gathered at a snowbird ski resort. That place was called Utah. And they coined the term called the Agile Methodology to define the methods that were emerging as an alternative to our former methodologies like the project management body of knowledge, PMBOK, that I'm talking about the Waterfall, the Predictive Approach, or the methodologies like the Prince 2 projects in, confined environments. Here, the Agile Manifesto was born in this meeting, this retreat, as it were, at this key result. So let's look at Agile Manifesto and understanding this manifesto, because they came out to declare that, oh, this is what we represent, this is what we our understanding, this is our belief, this is what we stand for now, this is what we believe works, you understand? And they were trying to create the separation from the predictive approach, the waterfall, traditional waterfall, the project management body of knowledge, type of approach to managing projects. And they were trying to state that, oh, the environment where we find ourselves, like the software development environment or industry, we find that this will work better for us, you understand? And, they were declaring their manifesto. And Agile's manifesto is trying to bring you to a mindset that, oh, Agile is hinged on 4 values. And these 4 values, you understand, is what guides Agile. These 4 values is what guides Agile. Agile is also hinged on what we call 12 principles. So the mindset of Agile, because every person, even us, we are, our actions, what controls our actions in our subconscious is our value system. You hear some people say, these are my principles. That is what guides their actions, their attitude, the way they behave, the decisions they make. So in Agile, it was trying to create a value system that guides decision making, guides actions of people, and a set of principles. You understand? So the Agile Manifesto is comprised of 4 fundamental values and 12 supporting principles, which lead the Agile approach to software development. Now, each Agile methodology actually applies the 4 values in different ways, but all of them rely on them to actually guide the development and delivery of high quality working software. Like I said, of course, Agile was introduced or originated from the software industry. So when deploying Agile as a mindset or as a principle, it is deployed within a framework. And that one of the most known and popular frameworks, like I said earlier, is Scrum. So the manifesto is something like what you see on the screen. This is what the manifesto states. It says we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value. Look at the values that they are stating. That we value this over this. That this is what we value. First one, individuals and interaction over processes and tools. What does this mean? It simply means we value individuals and the way these individuals interact, particularly when you are involved in a project and the processes are not working. You understand? And the tools are not working. Then we need to change tactics. We need to change the way we go about it. That's why change happens more in, you understand, setting a project environment where it's best. Once it happens more, it's best to deploy Agile. That's the approach that works better. You understand? So in that kind of environment, the individuals come together, they brainstorm, they crack their head, they think they need to interact and say, okay, how best can we achieve this? So that we don't sit with processes that are not working, deploying tools that are not working. We immediately sit down, start interacting. How can we change and adjust? How can we, you understand, adjust to this, challenge we are faced with and solve this, you understand? And that is why this value is very important. They value this over this. Another very important thing they value is working software over comprehensive documentation. Working software over comprehensive documentation. What does this mean? It simply means that it is more preferable for us to see that the software is working. Meaning that the product or the feature of the product, as it were, is actually working. We are seeing it working, not just that, stating in documents that it can do this, it can develop this, it can create this. we are not so conscious, because you could have a lot of things written down and the software is not working, or the product is not working, or the feature of the product is not working. That is not what is most important to us. What is most important to us is that the software, the product, the feature is working. You understand? I can relate better with what I can see working than a lot of documents with specifications, with stating that it can do this, it can do this, it can, you understand, in manuals. If I can see that it's working, I relate better with that. So I value that more. The next value is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Now, I've spoken about this earlier, but I'm still going to throw more light around this. Now, what does this mean? It means you involve the customer while the project is ongoing. So you are saying that we collaborate to create this product via this project. So when we create features of that product and we bring, which is parts of it, and we bring it and show you. For example, we've created the ground floor and we show you, say, okay, why not change the color for, the living room? Why not change the color for, the toilet? Oh, increase, I don't like this lighting. Use a different, so they have input. And at the end of the day, when you provide the ground floor to them, they're like, yeah, this is nice. You've included all those corrections and you brought something that is exactly what they want. You move to the first floor. You move to the, so you are collaborating with the customer, the client, the stakeholders in the course of carrying out the project. Unlike, the predictive approach, which is they don't see the entire 7 floors completed until 6 years, if it's a 6-year project, until 6 years at the end. So if they are not going to start making any changes, they will not be making those changes when they see the building after 6 years. And they'll say, I don't like this lighting. Please change. You say, no, it's not in our contract. We didn't agree to this. This is not what we signed up for. This wasn't what we, agreed in our contract. So you start, the stakeholders will now start renegotiating. Okay, what's the additional cost to be able to include this? And what additional thing do you want from me to be able to have this include? So it starts renegotiating. So the manifesto is saying we value more the stakeholder and customers collaborating with us to produce this, so that if he's going to make any change, he can make the change while the project is ongoing, not that at the very end, then we now have to start all over, because such leads to rework, waste of time, resource, effort, energy, and it becomes problematic because you start arguing and all of that. So the last value that they value more is responding to change over following a plan. Responding to change over following a plan. Your ability to immediately respond to change once change happens is very, very important, because a lot of times things don't go according to plan. A lot of times things don't go according to plan. So how do you respond to that change when the customer, the client, is coming and say, oh, the users no longer need this any longer, the new technology has come up, or oh, the user's need has changed, why not make this adjustment, make this correction? Or maybe there's a market trend, there's something new that has come up that he wants you to introduce, an additional feature in the product, something, so he can incorporate it while the project is ongoing. Do you understand? And it means you can immediately respond to that change. It's like saying that you intended to get to work and you forecasted, you predicted, remember the predictive approach, you predicted that, oh, normally it takes me 45 minutes to get to work. And you set out and you are driving, and then you get to, a route you normally take to your office, and then construction is going on right there, and you're like, what is going on? And then you start murmuring, you start complaining, oh, I didn't plan for this, I didn't expect this will happen. Instead of immediately, while you hit that, obstacle, immediately you look for an alternative route. You understand? Immediately you respond to change and look for an alternative instead of murmuring, complaining. You understand? Biting beating your chest and say, oh, banging your fist on the ground and say, oh, I didn't expect this will happen. And immediately you respond to change. You understand? Which is what they value more. So while there is value in the items on the right, which is on this side. Yeah. They are saying there's value there. Yeah, but we value items on the left-hand side more, which are the ones that are coming first before the over. So that's what they are saying. So the Agile Manifesto also has certain principles that guides it. And there are 12 of these principles that actually the Agile mindset is hinged on. The Agile Manifesto is projecting and saying we are guided by 12 principles. And the Agile Manifesto itself is something that, a lot of industries have begun to embrace. And the 12 principles are the guiding principles for the methodologies that are included under the title, the Agile Movement. And of course, they also describe a culture in which change is welcome and the customer is given the opportunity to introduce feedback, and the focus here is on the work being done. Okay, so when we look at this, we understand that Agile is a mindset which is hinged on principles, values, and brings about practices. And the practice, one of such a practice is Scrum. One of such a practice is Scrum. Remember, there are other practices, or what we call other frameworks, as it were. And there's XP, there's Kanban, there's Crystal, there's the dynamic programming, there's of course the dynamic systems development method, which is popularly known as the DSDM. Okay, so Agile, when being Agile, having agility is like, the chameleon, whereby it changes based on the environment. As the environment is changing, you understand, you notice that, the chameleon changes with the environment. You see its skin color changing to adjust, to be able to adapt to the new environment it's finding itself. So instead of complaining and murmuring, be agile, be flexible, adjust to the changes, immediately respond to those changes, you understand? And this approach helps you to actualize this. Do you understand? So let's dive into Scrum properly. Remember, this is one of the most popular and known framework where Agile is being deployed. So Scrum is actually a subset of Agile, and it is a lightweight process framework for Agile development, and the most widely used one at that. So when you look at it, Scrum is actually a framework for developing, delivering, and sustaining complex products. Now, what we mean by complex products, the predictive approach, the waterfall, when you hear me say waterfall, it's talking about, the process of, the way a lot of these predictive approaches are being managed. I'm talking about the 49 processes in your project management body of knowledge, PMBOK, where it starts from initiating your project to planning it, to executing it, to monitoring and controlling, and then closing. And you see, like a waterfall, it doesn't go back. Waterfalls don't go back. Unlike the iterative, it goes back. It goes back. It goes back. Iterative approach in Agile, you understand? And then delivers incremental, which is a fraction of it, a feature, you understand? It could be like delivering a feature of a product, for example. Let's assume the product is the creation of a new type of phone. Let's say an iPhone, maybe iPhone 17, for example. It's never existed. Let's assume that. So you are delivering this. One of the features of that product is the camera. You understand? So that's a feature you deliver to Apple while managing this project for them. That's a sub-project, and it's known and done within a sprint. What is a sprint? It's a 30-day period or less in which you deliver a feature, and you begin to deliver feature by feature by feature. You understand? Fraction, bits of that project, just like you are delivering the ground floor, first floor, second. You understand? And the good thing about such projects is that even if they stop the project in between, though halfway, you have produced what can be used and is useful. It means even if they say, oh, we are not continuing with this project again, and they stopped it when you are at the fourth floor, it means you have produced what can be used, because they can use the ground floor, the first floor, second floor, third. They can use it because you completed it to the interior decoration, to the plumbing, electrical work, to everything was completed, just like, so it was done instead of doing all of them simultaneously, the whole 7 floors, which is a very lovely one. So this is an example of what I mean. So, but the predictive approach is normally introduced in a simple project environment. That we call it where you have simple problems, then you introduce a predictive. But when you have complex problems, you introduce Scrum. Do you understand? When you have complex problems, you introduce Scrum. When you have chaotic problems, you introduce a framework called Kanban. But that is not our focus for this program today. Okay, so Scrum is known to be lightweight. What do we mean by Scrum being lightweight? Now, it means there's not so much information that you need to take in. That's why you notice, this program, this training is not taking so much time. You understand? It's not months, you understand, weeks. No, all we need to learn is just a few hours that you need to learn about Scrum. At least the major things. So, unlike the predictive waterfall, the PM or project management body of knowledge, type of, or the Prince 2 as it were, it takes a lot. There's a lot of information. Even if you've seen those handbooks, you've seen the project management body of knowledge guide, it's a lot of pages. It's over 500 pages, you understand, as it were. But if you look at the Scrum guide, you understand, which once you request will be given to you. Once you look at the Scrum guide, which is what this the curriculum of this particular, the framework of this particular course, the Scrum guide, just a few pages, roughly about 17 or thereabout pages. It's not much, you understand. All the information you need about Scrum is in just those few pages. So it's light. There's not so much information, you understand, that you need to gather and gain or acquire to be able to know what Scrum is. It's simple to understand. Why? Not so much information, just some few informations in a few pages which you need to know. You understand? Though it might be difficult to master, but very simple to understand. Now, what's the definition of Scrum itself? Let's look at this. Scrum is actually a process framework that has been used to manage work on complex products. Remember, complex products. The predictive is normally introduced to manage simple products. You understand? But for complex products, you need Scrum. It's been used to manage complex products since the early 1990s. And Scrum is not a process. Please note this for the certification exam you're going to be writing. Scrum is not a process. It's not a technique. Or it's not a definitive method, as it were. Rather, it is a framework within which you can actually employ various processes and techniques. Aha, you can see. It's not a process. It's not a technique. It's not a definitive method. You understand? It is a framework. Let's understand it that way. So let's look at Scrum theory, because Scrum is founded on a theory. What is that theory? Scrum is founded on what we call the empirical process control theory. The empirical process control theory is what Scrum is founded on, or what is known as empiricism. What is known as empiricism? Empiricism asserts that knowledge comes from experience and making decisions based on what is known. Now, why is this important? Because the predictive approach, before you begin, you have things you can gain knowledge from. Documents, historical data. You have lessons learned of previous projects which are similar to yours, which you can look into and can give you an idea, you understand, of what to expect on this project. So you can predict this is what will likely face. But in this kind of project that you don't have such historical, is new, it's never been done before, you have no such historical data and no lessons, you develop it on the project. So you learn on the job and you begin to gather data, you begin to develop the knowledge, experience while you are on it, on this project. So you become knowledgeable while you're on the project. You begin to learn. Even from the feedback from your stakeholder, you begin to learn while you're ongoing. So Scrum actually employs an iterative, incremental approach to optimize predictability and to control risk. How does it control risk? One of the very interesting things about Agile Scrum that enables you to control risk is the fact that you are not attacking the entire project at a go. You understand? You are taking it one step by one, step by step, gradually. It means you have the entire product that is required of you to produce. You pick a feature, you produce that, you give the stakeholder. You pick a feature. Now, where are you picking it from? You are picking it from a place known as a product backlog. So in the predictive approach, we have what is called, when you go to the stakeholders to collect their requirements, you put it in what is called a requirements documentation. But in Scrum, what you have is when you go to the stakeholders to collect their requirements, it's brought in and put in a product backlog, where it's the backlog of what you are actually meant to do on this project, what the product will look like, the features, you understand, and all of that the product will have. So you begin to pick from there, produce a feature of it, pick from, you understand, and it's done, remember, incrementally. That means you one by one, and because you are moving, you understand, gradually, you are having to handle a project as sub-project. So your speed, you understand, is not, you're not tackling it, so you're not running, like the predictive, which is, you understand. So it's like somebody who is now, it's like someone who is driving, and you can't compare the risk associated with if something just jumps in front of your car when you are driving at a speed of 180 kilometers per hour, compared to someone who is driving at a speed of 40 kilometers per hour. Of course, the person who's driving at 40 kilometers per hour or at 20 kilometers per hour will be able to manage the steering if something jumps in, you understand, while he's driving in front of him on the road. He'll be able to manage the car and be able to, maneuver easier than somebody who is running at 180 kilometers per hour. That kind of speed. But if something just jumped, he could possibly somersault, lose control. So it means the risk associated with projects like the predictive, because of the way you are moving, and remember, you are handling it you are taking it as a big chunk, unlike the Agile Scrum, which is in bits, chunks, little chunks, moving gradually. It does increment. You handle a feature, you deliver, you understand? So the risk is more minimal. You understand? If you look at it. So the Scrum Theory, which is the empirical process control theory, has 3 pillars. These 3 pillars uphold every implementation of the empirical process control. So these three pillars, we have transparency, inspection, and adaptation. These are the 3 pillars. What does the transparency talk about? The transparency means that you need to make visible, you need to make accessible what the team, the project team as it were, needs to be working with, so that they can see what is going on, they can see whether they are progressing, they can be able to see, you understand, and have access to what they need to work with, particularly to be able to carry out their work. So it must be made transparent. What needs to be made transparent? We call them artifacts. What are the artifacts? The artifacts are things that are made to be transparent, so that you can be able to access them to see what is going on the project, whether you are progressing or you are retrogressing. You understand? Whether there are things that you need to improve on, there are things you need to work on. The artifacts are what you need to make transparent and visible. I will explain what artifacts are, because there are 3 artifacts in Scrum that needs to be made transparent. An example of, when we talk about transparency is, you have a team working on a project. They are all working remotely. You understand? And we need to find out what was the state of, the project that we are on. So maybe there's a document that enables us update from time to time that we can all access, online, like a Google Sheet, for example. So if maybe the project requires us to interview some of the staffs of an organization to find out, what is going on and all of that. So that Google Sheet that we can all access, and we are given the access code and all of that to access it, because that is when you have made it transparent. So you're able to see, that's an artifact, for example. You're able to see on the Google Sheet and see, oh, who interviewed the person, when the person was interviewed, what the response of the person that they interviewed was. You understand? And then, you know, you can now update that from time to time. That's an artifact. That's what must be transparent. Now, what are you inspecting? Because the next one is inspection. So you need to inspect these artifacts via events. You need to inspect these artifacts via events. There are 5 of these events which we are going to see, whereby you are inspecting the artifacts that have been made transparent. Then, when you inspect and you update, you make all the necessary adjustments on it, and you make those changes, you adopt it. You understand? So adaptation is after you've made those adjustments, changes on the artifact you've inspected, then you make, you understand, you adopt it. You understand? You adapt to it, this new change that you've made. So we will get to see and understand this much better as we proceed. So understand the Scrum framework is such that Scrum has 3 roles. Scrum has 3 roles. The product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master. Scrum has 3 artifacts. 3 artifacts. It has the product backlog, it has the sprint backlog, and it has the product increment. Now, Scrum has 5 events. Now, these roles, meaning that these are the people who are inspecting the artifacts that have been made transparent via events, where the events are the mediums in which they inspect. These events, there are 5 of these events. So there's sprint, there's sprint planning meeting, there's a daily Scrum meeting, there's a Scrum review meeting, and there's a Scrum retrospective meeting. These are all the events in which the Scrum team, these 3 people, these 3 roles, come in to inspect the artifacts, to look at it if it's something that is okay, if they need to make adjustments and changes so that they can adapt. They can adapt to it. Then Scrum also has 5 values. Now, this is different from the Agile Manifesto 4 values. Scrum has 5 values. It has these values. And the values are openness, courage, respect, focus, and commitment. These are the 5 values of Scrum. So let's look at the elements of Scrum and the roles that actually bind them. Let's look at this carefully. Okay, so looking at the elements of Scrum and the roles that bind them, we understand that these events are events where you inspect and adapt. These events, how many of these events? 5 events. The container event. The container event is the sprint. A sprint is normally a 30-day period or less. That sprint is like a sub-project where you actually carry out the production or the creation of a particular feature of the product, the overall product, which you are meant to produce. It's like saying, okay, the creation of that ground floor is done in this sprint. That's an example, like a feature. So it's normally a 30-day period or less. So this sprint is the container event that contains the remaining 4 events. What are the other 4 events? Sprint planning meeting, daily Scrum, sprint review meeting, and the sprint retrospective meeting. So remember, Scrum has 5 values: courage, focus, commitment, respect, and openness. And these values, when these values of commitment, courage, focus, openness, respect, when they are all embodied and they are lived by the Scrum team, the Scrum pillars of transparency, inspection, and adaptation tend to come to life and build trust for everyone. Now, the Scrum team members learn and explore those values as they work with the Scrum roles, events, and artifacts. Now let's look at and understand who the Scrum team is. Who's the Scrum team? Okay, the Scrum team consists of a product owner, the development team, and a Scrum Master. The Scrum teams are organized, or what we call self-organizing and cross-functional. They are self-organizing teams who choose how best to accomplish their work rather than being directed by others outside the Scrum team. Okay, so you have the product owner. The product owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product resulting from work of the development team. How is this normally done? Of course, this is normally done and in a number of ways, and it may vary widely across different organizations. And the Scrum teams and individuals are those who are involved. The product owner is actually the sole person responsible for managing this product backlog I was talking about. The product backlog is where when you go to collect the requirements from the stakeholder, it gives you an idea of what they want, and you put that guides you. It's put in a product backlog, which is what are the features, the specifications, the things that are meant to be in this product. That is what it is in the product backlog. So the product backlog is such that it gives a feel of all that, and when you are supplying or delivering a feature of that product, when you are delivering a feature of that product on your sub project, remember the entire project you are delivering it as sub project. So when you are delivering a feature of that major project, like in a sub project, you are going to deliver something working that gives the person a feel of everything that the person is experiencing. It's like saying that you are having to give someone a sandwich and you cut a chunk of it. So it means you don't give the person a top, you give the person a chunk, which is to have a feel of all that. So, for example, you are developing a software for someone, like maybe you are developing a website also for someone. You give the person maybe a feature in a sprint, which is the login screen, and the customer or the stakeholder receives that and looks at it and says, well, this is what I want, this is lovely, and gets value on time. So it is working. The person has a feel of all that the product should be, having to look like. And that is what we call our product backlog. Our product backlog is everything that is in that product, everything, the features, all that is supposed to be there, the specifications, all of that is what is in the product backlog. Okay, so let's look at the product owner carefully. The product owner is one person, not a committee. The product owner may represent the desires of a committee in the product backlog, but those wanting to change anything on the product backlog items priority must address the product owner. It means nobody can change anything on the product backlog without notifying. That means it's only the product owner that can change anything on the product backlog. The product owner's decisions are visible in the context and ordering of the product backlog. So the product backlog, you see the product owner is involved in the arrangement of it. It means that when they are trying to deliver a feature on that project via a sub project, they pick the one that the stakeholders, the feature that they place as highest priority. So the product owner arranges that and places the one that is reckoned by the stakeholder as the one that is of higher priority to him or her. So they place on top. So the first most important, second most important, third most, you understand, like that, those features, that's the way they arrange them in the product backlog. So the product owner is doing that. And then we go to the development team. Remember, there are three roles: the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master. So let's look at the development team. The development team consists of professionals who do the work of delivering a potentially releasable increment of done product at the end of each sprint. So a Scrum project, a Scrum team manages a project and breaks it into sprints, what we call sub-projects. The entire project is broken into sprints. They are 30-day periods or less. They are events. You understand? So that 30-day period is the event, is the sub-project itself, in which you actually deliver a feature of that product to the stakeholders. And the people involved in the hands-on work are known as the development team. They are the technical people, comprising of the coders, the programmers, the designers, the tech guys. They are the ones in that development team. They are the ones getting their hands dirty. They are the ones, literally doing the work, and on their hands and knees and getting the work done. So the done increment, which is what they come out with at the end of the day when they have done this. A done increment, the increment for that particular sprint, is required at the sprint review. So what they do is that they develop this particular feature from the product backlog and in that sprint. And once they complete it, they will present it in one of the events known as a sprint review meeting. That event is where the product owner will invite the stakeholders. He will invite the stakeholder. He has the sole prerogative. He has the authority, and he's the only one that can invite the stakeholders to that event. So he invites them to that event called the sprint review meeting, where they look at what the development team has developed as the done increment and review it. It's at that point when we are talking about feedback, where the stakeholders, they interject, and they also often give their feedback as relating to, what they want changed. So if there's anything new they want to introduce, any new technology, any adjustment that needs to be made, it's in this meeting called a sprint review meeting. They make those adjustments, they make those changes. So they review what the development team has come up with, and then they can make all the necessary adjustments, corrections, and what you review it and say, okay, this looks like what we want, this is okay, you understand? It's in that meeting. Then they remember, it's an inspect and adapt event, which is that sprint review. So they look at it, they inspect, this is okay, this is okay, then they adapt to it, they adopt it, they adapt it, you understand? So a done increment is reviewed at the sprint review meeting. Only members of the development team are the ones that create the increment, the done increment. So the development teams are actually structured and empowered by the organization to organize and manage their own work. Remember, they are self-organizing. No one can actually force the development team to work from a different set of requirements. No one, except they themselves. They go about doing their work themselves. Nobody can force them to work from a separate requirement. An example, like the CEO comes in and comes to the Scrum team and gets to the development team and picks a member and says, follow me, I want you to go and handle something for me in the marketing department. He will remember the 5 values of Scrum. He will respectfully tell the CEO with courage that he's focused on the requirements on the product backlog, which is where your sprint goal comes in via an event called the planning meeting. That I'm focused on the sprint goal, meaning for this sprint, I'm focused on this sprint goal. And that is where my commitment is. You can see the values playing out here. Because nobody can tell them to work on anything else apart from the requirements which are captured in your product backlog. Do you understand? That's what that statement is saying. Remember, they are self-organizing. Now, you notice there's a difference between the project manager in the traditional waterfall PMBOK, approach, and this kind of approach to managing projects, Agile Scrum. Here, you don't have a project manager. what you have is a servant leader who is serving to ensure he creates an enabling environment for this team to work in. So he is not a director, he is not a instructor, he is not a dictator, he is a coach. He guides, he teaches, he coaches. Unlike the predictive waterfall PM project management body of knowledge guide approach, you have the project manager instructing, directing, ordering. In Agile Scrum, you don't have that. It's different. So you will never see the word project manager used in Scrum or in Agile. You won't see the word project manager. It doesn't exist. It only exists in the project management body of knowledge guide, PM work. Now, I want you to take note of that. So, looking at the development team, let's look at some of the following characteristics of this team, the development team. Remember, there are 3 roles in Scrum: the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master. So let's look at the characteristics of this team. They are self-organizing. Please take note of that. Not even the Scrum Master tells the development team how to turn the product backlog. Remember the product backlog, where all of those requirements, specifications of the product are placed in that. No one tells them how to turn this product backlog into increments of potentially releasable functionality. Remember, whatever they are producing, which is a done increment, must be functioning. It must be something that once they give it to the stakeholder, he can use it at that point. You understand? So the development teams are cross-functional. What do we mean by cross-functional? It means that, remember, they have, in that team, you have all of the various skills there present to produce this feature, produce this product. All the skills are there: the coder, the tester, depending on the kind of project you're handling. I'm just talking about using this as an example because I'm trying to relate it with, okay, say using an example of the software industry, for example. So the coder, the tester, the programmer, you understand, they're all present within this team. So the idea about the cross-functional is that these people, some of the team members, have more than one skill. So you can have a tester also having the skill of a coder, a programmer as well, and a designer, as the case may be. So in case one team member is absent, is not around as a result of illness or something, it means a team member can fill in for him. He can cross from his function and function in this team member that is absent in his function. Why? Because he also possesses that skill. So this member of that team does not hold the entire team to ransom, in the sense that because he's not available, we can't move on, we can't get the work done. So we are at his mercy, we are held, you understand, at ransom to this guy. But because it's a cross-functional team, it means team members can cross and function in other roles. You understand? If they can cross and function in other areas, you understand, of functionality. It means they can function, a developer, a tester can cross and function as a programmer, can cross and function as a designer, or can cross and function as a tester, dependent. So that's what we mean by cross-functional team. So Scrum recognizes no titles. Please take note of that for the exam. Scrum recognizes no titles for development team members. So if you see a question that's talking about, what are the titles, you understand, or roles in the development team, they put tester, coder, programmer, and they put team as an option. The option is team. There are no titles. They are all one team, regardless of the work being performed by that person. Now, Scrum recognizes no sub-teams in the development team. So the development team doesn't have a team of testers, a team of programmers. Inside the development team, there's no such thing. Regardless of the domains that need to be addressed, like things like testing, architecture, operations, or business analysis, and even individual development team members may even have specialized skills, like I said, and are areas of focus, but accountability in the long run belongs to the development team as a whole. They are all accountable for themselves. Remember, they are self-organizing. They organize themselves. They manage themselves. An example: you might have a situation whereby they might have a skill that is lacking, and they notify the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master goes to outsource and to look for that skill and brings the skill into the Scrum team and brings that person or brings that resource, as it were, to the development team. He does not instruct and say, you go and do this or you function. The team will by themselves, they will self-organize. It means they will know by themselves where this person will fit in. The Scrum Master does not need to instruct or tell that resource or that skill that he has brought in, you function here. No, he doesn't do that. The team is just to bring the skill to the team, and the team will know how they will organize themselves to get where this person will function, how this person will function. The team will know that by themselves. That's what we mean by they are cross-functional. Now let's look at the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master. Let's look at the Scrum Master. Let's understand who the Scrum Master is. The Scrum Master is responsible for promoting and supporting Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. Please, this Scrum Guide is very important. Let's ensure we get it. So you can go through it. It's just a few pages, about 16 or something pages. You can go through it so that it gives you an idea of what Scrum holistically is about. So Scrum Masters do this by helping everyone understand the Scrum Theory, the Scrum practices, the rules, as well as the values. You might see this in the exam. Please take note of it, that the Scrum Masters actually help everyone understand the Scrum Theory, the Scrum practices, rules, and values. Now, the Scrum Master is a servant leader, like I said. So you don't have, the Scrum Master recognized as a project manager. No, he's a servant leader for the Scrum team. He serves them. You understand? Making sure he removes every form of impediment, making sure he makes the environment such that it makes it easier for them to work in. So the Scrum Master helps those outside the Scrum team, meaning those people in operations and all of the other stakeholders external to that project, understand which of their own interactions with the Scrum team are helpful and which ones are not. So it's like the one guiding and saying, don't interfere, don't disturb the Scrum team, the development team members. So he acts as an intermediary between the organization. I'm talking of the operational part of it. He acts as an intermediary between them and find out, what do you want? Oh, don't worry, I'll communicate it to them, like a mediator of some sort. So the Scrum Master helps everyone also change these interactions to maximize the value created by the Scrum team. Now, the Scrum Master serves the product owner in several ways. The Scrum Master also serves the development team in several ways, and he also serves the organization. Which organization? Scrum, the team is functioning within an organization, so their own thinking, their own understanding. Remember, they are hinged, they are working with certain values, they are working with a mindset. So the organization as a whole might not understand fully the way these guys are going about their work. So the Scrum Master serves this organization to help them understand and adopt, Scrum thinking. I'm talking about Agile Scrum thinking. He helps them to adopt and accept this. So it serves the development team, it serves the organization as a whole. I'm talking of the Scrum Master himself. Now let's look at these events. Remember, there are 5 events, and the container event itself is the sprint. So let's understand this event. Now, starting from the very beginning, when we talk about these events, prescribed events are actually used in Scrum to create regularity and to minimize the need for meetings not defined in Scrum. All these events that we are talking about are time-boxed events, so that every event has a maximum duration. So if you look at these events, starting from the sprint is normally a 30-day period or less. Then the next event, remember the sprint is a container event, then the next event is a sprint planning meeting. that sprint planning meeting, it's normally a 8-hour time box, maximum of 8 hours. And then the next event is a daily Scrum meeting. That event is 15 minutes. Then the next event is a sprint review meeting. That event is 4 hours and then maximum. And then the last event is a sprint retrospective meeting. That event is a time boxed event of 3 hours maximum. So all of these events are time boxed events, and such that every event has a maximum duration. That's the cap on those events. They could be less than that number of hours or minutes, but they must not exceed that particular maximum time. So once a sprint begins, its duration is normally fixed and cannot be shortened or lengthened. What does that mean? It simply means that once you've worked with a sprint time frame and said our sprint is going to be 3 weeks. Remember, sprint is normally 30 days maximum or less than that. So if you have agreed that our sprint will be 3 weeks, it must remain within those 3 weeks. It means while the sprint is ongoing, you can't change that 3 weeks any longer and say, oh, let's shift it to 4 weeks. No, it must still remain at that 3 weeks. Now, the remaining events may end like the other events, like the sprint review, sprint planning meeting. Those other events may end whenever the purpose of that event is achieved. So if the purpose of the meeting, the event is achieved, there's no need just passing time and say, well, let's just, just keep talking till the maximum time ends. No. Once the purpose of that event has been achieved, even if it's within, for example, if it's a daily Scrum, if it's within 8 minutes that you have achieved the purpose of why you have called for this meeting, end the event. You don't need to wait and, just be passing time and saying all manner of irrelevant things in the meeting just to pass time. End the event and let everybody go back to their work. So it says the remaining events may end whenever the purpose of the event is achieved, ensuring an appropriate amount of time is spent allowing waste, in the process. So you want to ensure that an appropriate amount of time is spent without allowing, waste in the process that you are ongoing. So let's look at this carefully. Let's look at the events properly. So each event in Scrum is a formal opportunity. Please take note of this. It's a formal opportunity to inspect and adapt something. What are they inspecting? The artifacts. How many artifacts do we have? There are 3. The product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the done increment, product increment. So these events are specifically designed to enable critical transparency and inspection, because these artifacts are what are made transparent for inspection. Failure to include any of these events actually results in reduced transparency and is a lost opportunity to inspect and adapt. Now, this is a question you're going to see also in the certification exam, that failure to include any of these events, these 5 events, failure to include any of these events actually results in reduced transparency and a lost opportunity to inspect and adapt. You'll see that in the exam. Please take note of that. So let's start with the first event, which is the container event called a sprint. Now, this you will see in the exam also, this phrase. The heart of Scrum is a sprint. Please, if you're writing, I want you to take note of this. You'll see this in the exam. The heart of Scrum is a sprint, and a time box of 1 month or less during which a done, usable, and potentially releasable product increment is created. Sprints actually have consistent durations throughout a development effort. A new sprint normally starts immediately after the conclusion of the previous sprint, meaning that when you look at sprints, it's like in the PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge, it's like when you complete, a milestone. So the completion of a sprint is like a milestone, you understand? So once you complete it in the PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge guide, it states that there's 0 duration between milestones. So it's the same thing here. Sprints, immediately you finish, there's no time lapse given. Immediately you finish a sprint, you are moving to the next. there's no time in between. There's no duration allowed in between in terms of resting. Immediately you finish a sprint, you move to the next. Do you understand? There's zero duration, as it were. Okay, so sprints contain and consist of the sprint planning meeting. Because remember, it's a container event, so it consists of the sprint planning meeting, daily scrum. Then it also consists of the sprint review meeting, and then the sprint retrospective meeting. So during the sprint, no changes are actually made that would endanger the sprint goal. Now, normally, once the sprint starts, it starts with a sprint planning meeting. That sprint planning meeting, you develop or come out with what is called a goal for the sprint. We call it a sprint goal. So it means in the course of this sprint, that is what will guide the work of the Scrum team. This sprint goal. So it means your focus is on the sprint goal, achieving the sprint goal. And the goal is normally rated as SMART, like that acronym. It must be specific, it must be measurable, it must be attainable, it must be realistic, and it must be time bound. Remember, it's already time bound. We're talking of a 30-day sprint or less. So then also during the sprint, quality goals do not decrease, and scope may be clarified and also renegotiated between the product owner and the development team as more is learned. Remember, this sprint, within it is the opportunity to learn. Because remember, you did not have reference historical data, you didn't have references, you didn't have lessons learned from previous projects. You are developing it on the go while you are handling this sprint on this project. So you are learning. You learn from the feedbacks you get from the stakeholders in the sprint review meeting. You learn while you are working, you are gaining experience, so you are adjusting and all of that. You are learning while you're on the go. You understand? And you gather experience. So there are times that while you are ongoing, there are things that you need to adjust, you need to change. Remember, you are inspecting and adapting in all of these events. So as changes are happening, you understand, you renegotiate that some certain aspects be changed or re-estimated on your product backlog with the product owner. Who are the people engaged in this? The product owner and the development team members. So the sprint, when we look at it carefully, may be considered a project with no more than 1 month horizon, or what we call a 30-day period or less. Like projects, sprints are used to accomplish something, and each sprint has a goal of which is to be built, a design and flexible plan that will build or guide building it, the work, and the resilient product increment. Sprints are limited to 1 calendar month, and when a sprint's horizon is too long, the definition of what is being built may change. Complexity may arise, and the rise may increase. That's why it's better to keep it within a 30-day period or less. Once you are making it 2 months, 3 months, things start changing. That's what this is pointing out. Complexity starts to arise, the risks may increase, and so on and so forth. So sprints actually enable predictability by ensuring inspection and adaptation of progress towards a sprint goal at least every calendar month. And sprints also limit our risk to 1 calendar month, of course, because whatever you have done is within a month. So if you need to do a rework, you can quickly make those adjustments because you've not spent so much time, effort, resource, just 30 days. Unlike the other predictive approach, which is for a project of 6 years, as an example. 6 years, that by the time you are on a project and you're going stretch, you understand? And by the 5th year, realize some things need to be changed and all of that. Imagine the cost of having to change anything at that time. When you have invested time, energy, effort within that period of 4 or 5 years, and then you are trying to change something at that time, you can't compare with trying to change something in 1 month, in 30 days, compared to in 5 years or 6 years. When you want to change at that point, the change and cost of changing will be drastic, will be quite way expensive. So you don't want to have to experience that. So let's move to the next event, which is a sprint planning meeting. Remember I said the sprint planning meeting, you are coming up with a sprint goal. That is what you are coming up at the end of the day with, a sprint goal. So what is a sprint planning event? Let's look at it. What is a sprint planning event? Now, the work to be performed in the sprint is planned at the sprint planning. And this plan is created by the collaborative work of the entire Scrum team. So in this event, the Scrum team comes together and they sit down to look and review. What are they inspecting? They are inspecting the product backlog to come up with a sprint goal. So in the course of the sprint, you understand, they are focused, and what guides them is achieving and fulfilling that sprint goal. So I want you to take note of this. What is inspected in a sprint planning meeting? The product backlog. What is inspected in a daily Scrum meeting? They inspect what is known as a sprint backlog, aligning it or measuring it against the sprint goal. What is inspected in the sprint review meeting? The done increments. That means what the development team has done as an increment, which is a feature, is what is inspected in a sprint review meeting. Then in a sprint retrospective meeting, what is inspected? The team inspects themselves. They inspect themselves. So they look at how they perform, how they have done their work. You understand? If there's any way, any room for improvement, if there's any area they need to improve on. So they come up with an improvement plan, which they will implement in the next sprint. So the work to be performed in the sprint is normally planned at the sprint planning meeting. This plan is created by the collaborative work of the entire Scrum team. And the sprint planning is normally time boxed to a maximum of 8 hours, like I said earlier, for a 1 month sprint. Now, if the sprints are shorter, maybe like it's 3 weeks, it's 2 weeks, then this event, like the sprint planning meeting, the timing would now be shorter. It might not take all the 8 hours any longer because the sprint is now shorter. It's not 30 days any longer. It's shorter than 30 days. It's less than that. So it means the sprint planning meeting will now be also shorter. Now, the Scrum Master ensures that the event takes place and that the attendants understand its purpose. That's the work of the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master teaches the Scrum team to keep it within the Scrum team. That's what he does. Okay. Let's look at the sprint goal itself, which is the output from this sprint planning meeting. The output from this sprint planning meeting is a sprint goal. The output from this sprint planning meeting is a sprint goal. Let's take note of that. So let's look at the sprint goal itself. The sprint goal is the objective of the entire sprint. So the sprint goal is an objective set for the entire sprint that can be met through the implementation of the product backlog. The product backlog is what they are implementing. Product backlog is what they are implementing. So it provides guidance to the development team on why it is building the increment. So it is normally created during the sprint planning meeting, and the sprint goals gives the development team some flexibility regarding the functionality implemented within the sprint. The selected product backlog items deliver one coherent function, which can be the sprint goal. The sprint goal can be any other coherence that causes the development team to work together rather than on separate initiatives. Now, still looking at the sprint goal, a very important point also we should look at. As the development team works, it keeps the sprint goal in mind. So in order to satisfy the sprint goal, it implements functionalities and technology. So if the work actually turns out to be different than the development team had anticipated or expected, they collaborate with the product owner to renegotiate the scope of the sprint backlog within the sprint. So when we look at it, what happens is that The product backlog, remember, is where you pick, the features of the product, and that is where all the requirements of your stakeholders are put to clearly specify what the specifications are of the product. The stakeholder wants the specifications, the features, all of that specified in what that product is put in the product backlog. So in a sprint, in a 30-day sprint or less, the Scrum team has a sprint planning meeting. That is the next event, which is 8 hours. And then towards the end of that meeting, the development team, remember there are 3 roles. One of such roles is the development team. They go to the product backlog and they pick from the product backlog a feature which they want to complete within a 30-day sprint or less. And they put it in what is known as a sprint backlog. That is the second artifact. When the development team completes the work within a sprint, which is maybe development of a feature, they bring it into a sprint review meeting. That meeting is where they inspect the stakeholders are invited to that meeting by the product owner, who now comes in, and the stakeholders come in and they review the done increment by the development team and look at, is it what we want? Does it align with what we want? Is there any changes we need to make on this? They look at the market trends, they look at the users out there, they look at if there's a new technology that they need to introduce. So that needs to be reviewed in what the development team has produced. And then once they agree with what they produce, or once they say make these changes and they make those changes, whatever they produce will now be a potentially releasable done increment, which they will hand over to the stakeholders for them to immediately be able to use it. Do you understand? That is how this thing works. So let's look at the next event, which is the daily scrum. Remember, the daily scrum is a 15 minutes time boxed event. It's a 15 minutes time boxed event. So let's look at this, the daily scrum. Now, this event is normally such that only the development team meet in this event. The Scrum Master is not there. The product owner is not there. Just the development team. If the development team are having need for certain skills that the Scrum Master has, you understand, they can invite the Scrum Master into the development team to function in that skill. He will not function in that development team as a Scrum Master, but as a team member. It's a fellow team member in that development team because of the skill he has, which is relevant and useful for them in the development of the done increment. So the daily scrum is held every day of the sprint. It's a 24 hours, you understand, interval where each day this meeting must hold. What are they looking at? They're reviewing the tasks they've done. So at it, the development team actually plans work for the next 24 hours. And this optimizes the team collaboration and performance by inspecting the work since the last daily scrum. That's what they're looking at, the last daily scrum meeting, and forecasting upcoming sprint work. Now, the daily scrum is actually held at the same time and the same place every day to reduce complexity. So if you are holding the daily scrum, for example, in your boardroom, it means, and it's holding by 9 a.m. It must be held in the boardroom every day at 9 a.m. And if it's 15 minutes, 9 to 9:15 every day, you must maintain that time. You must maintain the venue, you understand, and ensure that you bring about consistency so that you can reduce complexity. That's the reason. Now, the development team, I'm still talking about the daily scrum. The development team uses the daily scrum to actually inspect progress towards the sprint goal. That's what they're inspecting. They are inspecting and it's like measuring and checking, you understand, in the monitoring and controlling of, in the predictive approach, in the PMBOK, project management body of knowledge. there's the monitoring and controlling. So what they are doing is they are actually monitoring. Remember, it's an inspect event. They inspect, you understand? They inspect the event this event, and they are checking progress towards the sprint goal, whether we are progressing. So what are they inspecting and checking it against? The product backlog. So the product backlog, what they're expecting and checking if what we are doing is aligning with our sprint goal. Is aligning with our sprint goal. So, like I said, the daily scrum is to inspect progress towards the sprint goal and to inspect how progress is tending towards completing the work in the product backlog. The sprint backlog. So the daily scrum optimizes the probability that the development team will meet the sprint goal. Now, every day the development team should understand how it intends to work together as a self-organizing team to accomplish the sprint goal and create the anticipated increment by the end of the sprint. Now, the structure of the meeting is set by the development team and can be conducted in different ways. It is also focused on progress towards the sprint goal. Okay, let's look at the next event, which is our sprint review meeting. The sprint review meeting. Remember, this is an inspect and adapt event. Now, the sprint review meeting is normally held at the end of the sprint to inspect the increment and to adapt the product backlog if needed. Remember, the development team are bringing the done increment into this event to have the stakeholders inspect along with, you understand, as in the entire team, and the people who invite the stakeholders is the product owner. He's the one that interfaces with the stakeholders, while the Scrum Master interfaces more with the organization the Scrum team is working in. And when you look at it, during this sprint review, the Scrum team and stakeholders collaborate about what was done in the sprint. Based on that, and any changes to the product backlog during the sprint, attendees of this meeting collaborate on the next things that could be done to optimize value. Now, this is an informal meeting, not a status meeting. And the presentation of the increment by the development team is intended to elicit or bring about feedback from the stakeholders and foster collaboration. That means to, facilitate collaboration, to help to bring about collaboration, that we are working together to actualize this, bring about this product, you understand? So our feedback is also very, very important. Okay, so the sprint review meeting, this is at most a 4-hour meeting for a 1-month sprint. Now, if you have, shorter sprints, of course, the event is usually shorter, and the Scrum Master ensures that this event takes place and that attendees understand its purpose. And a number of times, the Scrum Master teaches everyone to keep this event within the time box, meaning that the Scrum Master's role is to ensure this event happens and to ensure that this event is such that it is kept within the required time that it's supposed to be. Okay. So the sprint review actually includes the following elements. Can we look at it? The sprint review includes the following elements. The product owner discusses the product backlog as it stands. He or she actually projects likely target and delivery dates based on the progress to date. The entire group also collaborates on what to do next so that the sprint review provides valuable input to subsequent sprint planning meetings. Also, review of how the marketplace or potential use of the product might have changed, what is the most valuable thing to do next, and finally, to review of the timeline, the budget, potential capabilities, and marketplace for the next anticipated releases of functionality or capability of the product. Now, the result of the sprint review is a revised, please, if you're writing, I want you to take note of this. The result of the sprint review meeting. Remember, the result of the sprint planning meeting is a sprint goal. But here it's saying the result of a sprint review meeting is a revised product backlog. That actually defines the portable product backlog items for the next sprint. What is the result of a sprint retrospective meeting? It is an improvement plan. That is the result from a sprint retrospective meeting. So the product backlog may also be adjusted overall to meet the new opportunities that may arise as we go on. So let's look at the last event, which is the sprint retrospective meeting. Now, the sprint retrospective meeting is such that it is the opportunity for the Scrum teams to actually inspect themselves. And this is an opportunity for this Scrum team to inspect themselves and create a plan for improvements to enact during the next sprint. The sprint retrospective actually occurs after the sprint review and prior to the next sprint planning meeting. This is at most a 3-hour meeting for a 1-month sprint. Let's take note of that. Now, if the sprints are shorter, of course, you'll find out that these events might also be shorter. Now, the Scrum Master ensures that this meeting is positive and productive. The Scrum Master also teaches all of the team members to keep it within the time box. And the Scrum Master participates as a peer team member in the meeting, in this particular meeting, from the standpoint of accountability over the entire Scrum process. Okay. What is the purpose of this sprint retrospective meeting? To inspect how the last sprint went with regards to the people involved, the relationships between these people, the processes they've been involved in, and the tools. To also identify and order the major items that went well and the potential for potential improvements, and to create a plan for implementing improvements to the way the Scrum team does its work. So let's move to what we call the artifacts, the Scrum artifacts. Remember, these are the things that must be made visible and transparent for inspection. So these Scrum artifacts represent work of value to provide transparency and opportunities for inspection and adaptation. And artifacts defined by Scrum are specifically designed to maximize transparency of key information so that everyone has the same understanding of the artifact. Now let's start with the first artifact, which is the product backlog. Now, the product backlog is an ordered list of everything that is known to be needed in the product. It is the single source of remember the requirements you collected from the stakeholders for any changes to be made to the product itself. Because once the stakeholders keep coming and saying, make these changes, you must be able to update it on the product backlog. That means we have what is called product backlog management as well as product backlog refinement. Now, the product owner is responsible for the product backlog. He's the only one responsible, as is the one accountable for it, including its content, availability, and even the ordering of it. A product backlog is said to be never complete. Please, I want you to take note of that. Now, the earliest development of it actually lays out the initially known and best understood requirements. Now, the product backlog also evolves, meaning it changes as the product and the environment in which it will be used also changes. Now, let's move to the next. In your product backlog refinement, remember I mentioned that word. The product backlog refinement is actually the act of adding details, estimates, and even order to the items in your product backlog. So during the product backlog refinement, items are actually reviewed and revised. The Scrum team actually also decides how and when the refinement of this product backlog is done. Refinement usually consumes no more than 10% of the capacity of the development team. However, the product backlog items can be updated at any time by the product owner or at the product owner's discretion. Now, there's also a very important thing you need to take note of as we look at the product backlog. In order to also monitor what is going on your project, like a dashboard, you need to use what is called a sprint burn down chart or a sprint burn up chart. So it is like the Microsoft project software on the project management body of knowledge, traditional waterfall, pinbook, predictive approach, whereby you monitor, like using, it's like a dashboard, whereby you monitor how this project is doing. So that's on your sprint, you're actually using this to monitor progress towards what your sprint goal, and you're monitoring sprint progress, whether you're progressing or you're retrogressing. So whether you're ahead of schedule or you're behind schedule, your burn down chart will show you this. So the release burn down chart or the release burn up chart helps you to monitor whether you are doing well or not. Let's move to the next artifact, which is a sprint backlog. Remember, the concept of this sprint backlog is like you actually go to the product backlog. It's like somebody who wants, to eat food, and you come back from work, you want to eat food. So you go to the pot where, they prepare the food for you and you dish from the pot. Now, you don't eat from the pot. It's unethical. So you take a plate, you dish from the pot what you have sufficient capacity to finish at that instant. Do you understand? At that time. That is the same concept. So the development team, they go to the product backlog and dish what they have capacity to finish within a 30-day sprint or less, which they complete within a sprint. Do you understand? So they dish it in a sprint backlog. So it's like when you go to the kitchen, you dish from a pot. The pot is, in this case, a product backlog into a plate, which you have capacity to finish at that time. That is like your sprint backlog. And that is what you are able to finish within that particular sprint. Who are the people doing this? The development team. When do they do this? At the end of a sprint planning meeting. So the sprint backlog is the set of product backlog items selected for the sprint, plus a plan for delivering the product increment and releasing the sprint goal. The sprint backlog is also a forecast for the development team about what functionality will be in the next increment and the work needed to deliver that functionality into a done increment. The sprint backlog makes visible all the work that the development team identifies as necessary to meet the sprint goal. Now, to ensure continuous improvement, it actually includes at least one high priority process improvement identified in the previous retrospective meeting that was held by the entire Scrum team, probably in the previous sprint. Okay, so let's move to the last artifact, which is the increment itself. Let's look at that, the increment. Now, this increment is such that it is the sum of all the product backlog items completed during a sprint and the value of this increment of all previous sprints. So remember, you are delivering it incrementally. So it's one feature, there's the entire product, you deliver a feature of it, deliver a feature of it, so you see it increasing. Do you understand? That's what we mean by increment. Increment is increasing. So deliver a feature, deliver a feature, deliver a feature. You understand? Gradual. So the increment is the sum of all the product backlog items completed during a sprint and the values of the increment of all previous sprints coming together. So at the end of a sprint, the new increment must be done, which means it must be usable. It means you must be able to use it at that time. Immediately you are done. Like I used the illustration of the ground floor, first floor. It means people can immediately move in. If it's an office building, the office can start using the building. They can start using that ground floor. What can be going on? They can move in and start using it while the other floors are being built. So it's a increment that must be done, which means it must be in usable condition and meet the Scrum team's definition of done. That's another thing we need to look at, the definition of done. That's the next slide we're going to be looking at. Now, an increment is a body of inspectable done work that supports empiricism at the end of the sprint. The increment is a step toward a vision or a goal. That's what the increment, you understand, is working towards. So the increment must be in usable condition regardless of whether the product owner decides to release it or not. It must be in a condition whereby it can be used. It's very important. Remember that value we saw in Agile Manifesto, working software. It's better we have it working than documentations and list of like a procure manual, having all the specifications. Let it be working. You understand? Don't state it. Let it not be that you are stating that, oh, this is what it does, this is what it does. Show me that it's working. Working, you understand, that it can be used at the immediate. And it's like this. Some of these constructions going on around, you see that they will won't block the entire road completely. They won't close down the entire road. They will, maybe block sections of it and be working on, sections of it. They will complete the section, they will open it, people will start plying that road immediately. After they are done with it, they will move to another section, they will work on that, complete it, release it. That's incremental. You understand? They will start using it immediately, they move to another section, they work on it, develop it, you understand, create it, then release it, then motorists will start using it immediately until they complete the entire road over a period of time. So those sections that they are doing are sub-projects. They are like sprints, as the case may be. So what's the definition of done, which is the last thing we're looking at? What's the definition of done? So before we can say we are done. Now, the definition of done, we must understand it from the light of acceptance criteria versus what done really is. It is all about, the product owner's agreements with the stakeholders containing all the conditions that must comply with the product backlog items in order to consider a sprint completed, or in some cases terminated, because sprints can also be cancelled. I want you to take note of that. Now, let's look at what an acceptance criteria is. It's actually about the targeted component of which the functionality of what is known as a user story is judged. Normally, a product backlog is broken into, just like you have in the PMBOK, you have the project management body of knowledge guide, and you are looking at the 49 processes broken down and grouped into 5. Just like that, you have what is known as a work breakdown structure. That's a process, creating of a work breakdown structure. So also you have the product backlog, which is broken down. It's broken down from an epic into what is known as a feature, which is broken down into what is known as a user story, which is now broken down into tasks. So the user story is what is also completed within a sprint. So let's look at this definition of done. Done is a set of rules that apply to all user stories in a given sprint. So let's look at this closely. When we talk about the definition of done, let's look at this a bit closely and understand what we're talking about here. Okay? The definition of done, when is said to be when a product backlog item or an increment is described as done. Anyone must understand what done means, because we might not share a common understanding of what done is. It's like you taking this course, you understand? We might not say you are done by us, you completing this training, by watching this video. We might not say, oh, that's the definition of done. No. Our own definition of done is after you've gone through this video, you've watched it, you've learned, you've understood what we've said, and then you go and write the Agile Scrum Certification exam, and then you pass. We can say, oh, you are done. Because you are not done until you pass that exam first. That's our definition of done. So, do we share the common understanding of what the definition of done is? Very important. So, although this may vary significantly per Scrum Team members, but we must have a shared understanding of what it means for work to be completed to ensure transparency. Now, this is the definition of done for the Scrum Team and is used to assess when work is completed on the product increment. And the sum of definition guides the development team in knowing how many product backlog items it can select during a sprint planning meeting. Now, the purpose of each sprint is to deliver increments of potentially releasable functionality that adhere to the Scrum team's current definition of what done means. So, do we understand what the definition of done is? Do we share common understanding now? In your team, do you share common understanding? That you should ensure you verify. So congratulations, you've completed this program, and I must congratulate you for staying through this 2-hour and a few minutes session of listening. I appreciate your patience for waiting through this program, and I want to encourage, as you finish watching this video, to go ahead and take the Agile Scrum Certification exam. For further information, please, you can contact us. You need clarifications or you need any further explanation on what you've learned over this few hours. You can feel free to call us and contact us. But this is the Agile Scrum Foundation Certification course. After you've done this certification training, you've taken your exam and you've passed, the next stage I want to encourage you to go into is to undergo the Agile Scrum Master Certification course, as well as going further to take the Agile Scrum Certification Master Certification exam. Now, this program came to you by OAK Interlink Company. We run an array of professional certification courses ranging from project management to health and safety to cybersecurity and information security to big data and data science, and to facility and asset management, marketing and sales, an array of professional programs. I want to encourage you to visit our website at www.oakinterlink.com for more information, or you can feel free to contact us and call us on the numbers showing on the screen, or you could send us a mail and we'll be glad to respond immediately to any of the questions or inquiries you are willing to make as regards any of our programs. Thank you for your time. I believe you must have learned a lot in the course of this session, and I look forward to meeting you after now and having you become a true Agile Scrum certified professional. Thank you, and do have a lovely day.